Welcome back to the Mining Pod, everyone. We've got a duo news roundup this week with our boy Matt Kimmel and your boy Colin Harper. Got a lot of fun things coming down the pipe this week. We're going to be talking a little bit about 8’s partnership with Bitmain, where they are claiming they are helping Bitmain develop their latest hydro-cooled model. One of the kind of more unique news items I've seen in recent memory. We're going to be talking about Bhutan's fat Bitcoin stacks that they have acquired solely from mining. We're going to be talking about a letter to the editor that RFK Jr penned to The Economist. We're going to be talking about Trump's burger purchase. We can't get away from that. Got to talk about it. Matt's got some hot takes here. And we are going to wrap it up with a cry corner about a small town in Norway whose electricity prices have gone up after a Bitcoin mine left the area.
Accelerated by Compass is the premier accelerator program for Bitcoin mining sites at any stage of development. Our managed services provide expert guidance in site procurement, construction, energy agreements, and mining operations. Compass helps clients meet timelines and expectations for operational excellence, from greenfield to retrofits and everything in between. Don't just mine, excel. Visit compassmining.io now to discover how Accelerated by Compass can power your success.
Are you a retail or institutional investor interested in Bitcoin mining companies? The Miner Mag brings you free data and analysis from all major NASDAQ-listed Bitcoin mining operations to know who stands out. Check out visualized metrics and data-dependent stories at theminermag.com.
To start, we are going to kick it off with the difficulty update and network update. So Matt, why don't you take it away here with some takeaways from Hashrate Index's data dashboard?
Yeah, actually, I think a little bit more exciting of hash rate, hash price, difficulty environment this week than typical because there's kind of some volatility going on. So we're about halfway through the period. The last difficulty change was up about 3.5%. But right now we're tracking to have a downward adjustment of nearly 6%, or is that just over 6%?
Yep.
Colin? Yeah, and so I think there are a couple things going on right now. We are currently recording on a day when the Bitcoin price is absolutely ripping. On the week, we are up 9%. So there is some hash rate or hash price that is relief there, where the dollar per petahash per day that you're earning as a miner is going up due to the Bitcoin
back up
price.
To a juicy $44 per petahash.
Yeah, right. Lol, a juicy 44. But why don't you tell everyone a bit about what's going on with Fractal and how that's impacting the fee environment and a little bit of the hash rate stuff, because I think that's really interesting. We were talking about it a bit before the show.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the key to what's going on right now. And just to recap what you're saying, hash price is back up to about $44 per petahash per day. We're joking that's juicy, but when you compare it to the fact that it was at an all-time low last week or a couple weeks ago of $38 per petahash, 44 looking kind of good. 44 looking better than nothing. But so part of the reason why we're anticipating an upwards or a downwards difficulty adjustment, blocks are coming in at about 10 minutes and 39 seconds on average. That's above the 10-minute targeted average by the network. But we can see on this hash rate chart that hash rate peaked on the 7-day at 700 exahashes a second as a new all-time high on September 8th. And since then, over the last couple of weeks, it has plummeted, reaching a local low of 619 exahashes a second. I don't think we've seen that for a couple of months. It's slowly climbing back up. The reason for this, and listeners of Bitcoin Writers Room, Bitcoin Season 2 Writers Room, which Charlie Spears and I host every Friday, live streamed, will know that a lot of this hash rate curtailment on the Bitcoin network is directly as a result of the Fractal Bitcoin sidechain. Now, quick recap, I don't want to get into it too much. Fractal is a sidechain that was launched by the team at Unisat. It is a sidechain that can be merge mined with Bitcoin. Merge mining is when miners commit hash rate to two chains at the same time, so simultaneously producing hashes for both chains. They don't have to pick one or the other. So a lot of Bitcoin miners have been merge mining Fractal, but Fractal is set up in a unique way where they have this thing that they call cadence mining, where 1 out of every 3 blocks comes from Bitcoin merged mining hash rate, and 2 out of every 3 comes from what they call permissionless mining, which is fractal only mining. Now, as you'll see from these charts right here, when Fractal launched on September 8th, the hash rate for merge mining Fractal boomed to 241 exahashes. That's, roughly a third of the Bitcoin network. And permissionless mining slowly grew until Fractal's price started going bananas, and it exploded to a high of 36 exahashes a second. So basically what happened is when Fractal mining only, the permissionless mining became more profitable, you saw mining pools divert hash rate from Bitcoin to Fractal. And I think that has a lot to do with the hash rate dropping off that we saw last week. Now, it's also probably coming from some miners who are less profitable right now, have hit either break even or have become unprofitable, so they turned off. But both of these things in conjunction with each other, I think, led to that like 100 exahash or 90 exahash drop off that we saw last week on Bitcoin's hash rate on the 7th day. So super interesting, I think, kind of story right there, because it shows just how much these layer 2 and meta protocols are affecting what we're seeing on the base chain.
Yeah, something a little odd going on, right? Hash price is going up. People are making a little bit more per hash, yet hash rate coming off the network. I do expect difficulty to climb back to not be a full minus 6% when the adjustment actually comes in. So I expect some hash rate to come back online. But what's going on right now is definitely a bit odd and pretty interesting. So glad y'all are monitoring it.
It's been fascinating to see these, I really do think that there's a lot going on here. We saw with the Babylon chain launch, fees went crazy. And then now with the Fractal Bitcoin, hash rate has taken a hit as a result. You also saw, I think we've talked about this a few times on the pod. We definitely have. You saw hash rate marketplaces for cloud mining have insane premiums as miners were trying to rent hash rate to cash in on Fractal. So all of these, all the game theory here is interesting, and the second order effects are really juicy for us analysts. But hopping over to our first news item, Hut 8 and Bitmain expand innovation partnership. Gotta love the PR speak, with launch of next generation Bitcoin miner. So just to give a quick rundown of this, basically Bitmain and Hut 8 are apparently working on Bitmain's new Hydro model, the U3 S21 EXPH. That is a terrible name, but we're just going to roll with it. We're just going to call it the EXPH for short. And this is Bitmain's latest hydro-cooled model that has a staggering hash rate. It's like 860 terahashes at an efficiency of 13 joules per terahash. And importantly, it's reaching those levels essentially because the form factor is different. A lot of hydro-cooled form factors are rack-based. So, we always talk about air-cooled models. Usually they're like these shoebox miners that are kind of standalone units. They kind of almost look like a desktop. They don't look like a desktop, but it's a similar idea, right? This hydro miner the form fit is for racks. So it's kind of more like a traditional data center where you would have a full rack of these things rather than just a single standalone unit. But according to this press release, Hut 8 has been working with Bitmain to develop this model. I don't really know what that means. We're going to have Sue Ennis from Hut 8 on the Bitcoin Mining Stock Show, I believe on October 9th. And we're going to talk about this a little bit. So hopefully we'll get some more answers out. I don't know exactly what the R&D or development has been like, how much Hut 8 has been involved with it. But per this partnership, they are going to be deploying 15 exahashes worth of these EXPH hydro-cooled miners. And they are going to have the ability to purchase all of these miners from Bitmain in up to 3 tranches over a 6-month period from the time that they are deployed. So to start, Bitmain is going to be hosting them at Hut 8 facilities. Hut 8 will then have the option to purchase those in 3 separate tranches over a 6-month period. So we'll see how much they actually exercise of this, but this will be a huge boost to Hut 8's managed services. They have one of the largest managed services, not the largest managed services of any publicly traded miner, with the option to eventually subsume this into their self-mining hash rate. So interesting story with regards to development and also kind of an interesting deployment process. What are your takes on this, Matt?
It's really interesting they did this in collaboration with Bitmain. There is some precedent of companies getting deals such as this one, like Hut 8. I remember when Intel was trying to come out with an ASIC, right? Colin, who was it that got sort of exclusive rights out the gate to that miner?
Yeah, it was, I believe, Hive, Grid, and there was one other that is escaping me right now, but a handful of miners had kind of rights to that, the Blockscale ASIC, as it was called.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, we'll see how this plays out, see how much they actually exercise. I mean, these new miners, right? It is a lot of capex to go out and get these new miners, but you do tend to reduce or improve the efficiency, but sort of reduce the joules per terahash on your machines when you upgrade your fleet. So we'll see how this works out with Hut 8 and how much they actually exercise this deal.
Yeah, and I think you pointing out the Blockscale thing is interesting with Intel, because we've also seen that with Block, Jack Dorsey's company, with their new ASIC. They have a partnership with Core Scientific. Mm-hmm. And for an ASIC manufacturer trying to break into the industry, those kind of partnerships are crucial. They're almost make or break, because it shows, look, a large publicly traded miner with a lot of capital, a lot of hash rate, a lot of megawatts under management is betting on our product, right? So it's interesting to see the largest manufacturer in the space make a partnership like this. It makes me wonder, how much are they getting out of it? And maybe it is, this is kind of in the realm of inside baseball, but the hydro-cooled models are very much a pet project of McCree, Bitmain's CEO. And maybe this is a way to position this as, see, look, these are highly desirable units. When the market hasn't really come out, at least from what I've seen and talked to with other miners, they haven't really come out and said, these are better than air cooled, these are better than immersion. Almost seems like a way to position this new model as a step forward in hydro cooled technology for ASIC miners, but we will see.
In the competitive world of Bitcoin mining, one name stands out: CleanSpark, America's Bitcoin miner. At CleanSpark, efficiency isn't just a goal, it's our standard. Our sophisticated facilities are built and led by expert teams who care about Bitcoin and the communities we work in. Scale, we've mastered it. Our large-scale operations have set us apart in the industry as examples of community-oriented building. Our track record speaks for itself. We navigate the complexities of the new economy with precision and with skill, continuously achieving operational milestones. Curious about how we do it? We invite you to discover the story behind CleanSpark's success at cleanspark.com.
We've got a very interesting story coming out of the Mountain Kingdom of Bhutan.
I'm pumped for this story. I'm very excited, as you know, Colin. So let me just intro the Kingdom of Bhutan quickly for people who don't necessarily know about Bhutan, which it is located in the Himalayas, bordering between India and China. Let me tell you just how small this kingdom is. It has 727,000 people is their population. And to put that in context, that is smaller than 18 US cities. That's where it would rank, not states, cities. That would put them at less than 10% of the population of just New York City. So that is the Kingdom of Bhutan, who we're talking about right now. A couple fun facts I found out about Bhutan. They joined the United Nations just 1 month following the US abandoning the dollar peg in 1971. Interesting tidbit there. And their currency is currently pegged to the Indian rupee.
Huh.
Well, why? Why, Colin, are we... why is it relevant, this tiny country, to this podcast? Well, very interestingly, they have been diversifying their foreign exchange reserves with Bitcoin, and they're doing it through mining, taking all the necessary logistic and operational steps to mine. And as you said, it's all but confirmed that they're doing this with hydropower.
Right, which they're like very hydro rich with it. Right? I mean, they're extremely hydro rich country. And you said that their currency is pegged to the Indian rupee. That's interesting considering the little factoid that you shared with me about their energy exports, right? So can you kind of go into that really quickly?
Yeah, so their largest export as a country is hydroelectricity, mainly to India. It is an absolute major part of their economy. 60%, this is a stat I found, 60% of their government revenue was selling electricity. in 2009. So the Kingdom of Bhutan understands energy, right? Like they absolutely and they understand hydro. They built, this is where I suspect they are getting their power from, this to mine Bitcoin. They built the Tala hydroelectric power station in 2012 along the Wangchu River, which now contains 6 170 megawatt turbine generators. So that's equivalent to just over 1 gigawatt. 98% of their households have electricity in this country, right? They understand power, and they are directing some of that power to the Bitcoin network, producing sats, right? And stacking those sats.
Stacking 13,000 Bitcoin worth of sats, which is like that article said about 780 million.
Yeah. And we should say too, like this story came about because Bitcoin Magazine posted an article this week. But Bhutan's been in the mining space for quite some time, right? I looked at the kind of address that was tagged to them, that Arkham Intelligence tagged to them, and it had a Bitcoin balance since February 2021, right? Suspiciously close to the China mining ban, which was early that summer, right? And it is right bordering China.
Right.
So I think it's very interesting. I think Bitcoin Magazine had them as the 4th largest Bitcoin holdings by country. And they're like, by GDP and population metrics in the well into the bottom quartile. I think they're like 160s of about 200 countries. So bullish Bhutan is my take from this. I am
bullish Bhutan. Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting story. Going back to this, pulling out that thread on the China mining ban, they have partnerships with Bitdeer. Bitdeer is the only, as far as I know, the only Bitcoin miner, at least on the public markets, that is active in the country. And it's been a huge boon for Bitdeer because they can get access to cheap hydropower when, half of the world is trying to figure out how they're going to energize hyperscale AI data centers, right? So super interesting story. 4th largest Bitcoin treasure trove of any nation. I think Bulgaria is 2nd. El Salvador maybe 5th. I guess the US through Silk Road seizures is like 1st. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. I have no idea. We usually end up auctioning off our Bitcoin.
Yeah, I was gonna just highlight that is a bit different than holding it in your reserves as a country.
That is. So that's a really important point. And also, they're not doing the El Salvador thing where they're purchasing it. Like they're just straight up mining it. I mean, El Salvador's got the volcano mining, but that's honestly kind of a pittance compared to what the megawatts that Bhutan has deployed. And this is really smart on their end. I mean, as far from your understanding, from your research, and I think this is right. I mean, they generate the electricity. It's like state run, correct? So this is just gravy for them. They're just taking all of the excess. They really, they're paying probably Bitdeer for hosting fees, but they don't actually have to necessarily pay for the electricity. I mean, they have to pay for it in as much as they're running everything, but they can kind of just take what's not used off the top and then subsidize their Bitcoin mine. Super interesting. I would love to see. I would just love to have a lens into other countries that are doing stuff like this. We've heard stuff about Bitcoin mining in Russia. A lot of the oligarchs there. I don't know about the government, but they've got hella oil and gas resources. Feel like a lot of nation state mining or nation state adjacent mining, through privileged private companies is probably going to be a bigger trend over the next few years. And there's probably a lot more going on under the scenes than we know about.
I hope we get some breaking stories is my last note there. All right. What's the next story?
Not so much a story in as much as, as a story, but just something that I thought was interesting. A letter to the editor of The Economist, who has had, in my opinion, some of the most dog coverage of anything Bitcoin related. I mean, you kind of expect this. This is, The Economist is the regime's economic, magazine, the par excellence for the people up in Washington. But you have a letter to the editor to The Economist from RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr., basically making the argument that Bitcoiners have made for a long time that focusing on Bitcoin mining as a wasteful enterprise elides the fact that this technology can be used to incentivize electricity production, and specifically renewable electricity production. RFK is a big environmentalist. He's kind of been famous for lawsuits that helped clean up the Hudson River, and he has always been pushing kind of green energies or supporting them. And without belaboring it too much, the letter goes into all the ways in which Bitcoin mining can be used as a flexible load resource that can turn on and off when needed, and that can be used to bootstrap and monetize renewable energy systems. He also goes into something that I think is really important, a lot of people forget, is that this kind of load-bearing resource in Bitcoin mines competes directly with natural gas peaker power plants. Now, obviously, the Bitcoin miners are not producing energy per se, but they are a flexible load that can turn on and turn off when needed, when the grid has a shortfall or when it has a surplus, right? And that's exactly what nat gas peaker plants do. Nat gas peaker plants, I think, are only online for a few percentage points every year, or a few, and they basically come on when, especially in places like Texas, when there's a shortfall from things like wind or solar, and there's just not enough energy to meet demand. And as he points out in this last kind of kicker, if you actually look, and I did a story for Forbes a while ago, if you look at some of the bills that went through Texas that were trying to ban, curtailment from Bitcoin miners, or I think they were trying to levy an extra tax on it. I don't think they were trying to outright ban it, but they were trying to basically tax them additionally for providing those services. A lot of those bills were sponsored by senators who have taken money from PACs that are run by energy companies that have peaker plants. So it's like, if you follow the money in any of these things, you always end up gleaning a hint of truth of what's going on. But I just thought this was neat to see a presidential candidate, I guess, turned potential Trump advisor, talking about this phenomenon. And to me, it shows just how far a lot of these narratives have gone from, those kooky Bitcoiners talking about demand response, to no, this is actually a legitimate solution to some of our energy problems.
Yeah, it's refreshing to see leaders in the United States basically come out and say, hey, actually, Bitcoin mining makes sense for these reasons. And I mean, mainstream support for Bitcoin is becoming more of a normative thing, and you just like to see that across the board, right? RFK Jr, former candidate for the president, that is now kind of like stepped back and done an endorsement, but also Larry Fink, right, has come out and changed his tune,
Yep.
right? We're seeing this. I mean, we're the next story, what I guess we'll just transition to. But there are more and more instances of kind of people in the mainstream coming out and saying, oh yeah, Bitcoin's cool.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it really has kind of entered the Overton window, I think, in a lot of ways. But on to the next story, which I'll let you take away, Matt, which everyone probably already knows at this point, but
I will just lay it out there. Frankly, Trump bought a cheeseburger with Bitcoin at a bar in New York. I have to say, I'm not going to give too much praise to this story. I'm a bit taken aback that this is in contrast to the story about Bhutan a minute ago. But, if he becomes the president-elect, he takes a positive stance on Bitcoin. Maybe he appoints some Bitcoin-friendly leadership into the governing body, which, the Biden administration is like a bit of a stark contrast to. And it seems like the simplest path forward for the Kamala Harris camp would probably be the same. Maybe if he does those things, if he maybe starts accumulating a Bitcoin reserve, if he frees Ross, I will happily stand on any platform really and say, way to go in the Bitcoin context, policy wise. But until then, I'm just going to say it. I would rather, endorse, praise the kingdom of Bhutan and the monarch that is presiding over it.
You heard it here first. You heard it here first. Matt is a staunch monarchist.
Okay. All right.
No, but I think that is important. It's like a really interesting contrast. I think you said at the beginning of the show before we started recording that these stories came out on the same day, and they really couldn't be any more opposite in kind of the gravitas, right? I mean, Trump buying burgers with Bitcoin, even though he really didn't do it, like Drew kind of did it there, Drew Armstrong of Cathedra.
Shout out.
Versus a nation state mining Bitcoin for their treasury. It's just kind of leagues apart in terms of support and importance. And I do hear what you're saying, though. I mean, there's a kind of realpolitik here, I think, with a lot of Bitcoiners supporting Trump. There's a huge libertarian streak through the Bitcoin industry. A lot of people who have probably are the both sides are evil type thinking. But the Democrats and the Biden administration have been really just kind of hostile towards Bitcoin. There's a laundry list of things that we won't go through today, but it's on record. There's a lot of stuff that they've tried to push through that have been openly hostile towards Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. And so to see any sort of even just lip service is just refreshing, and he's going to get votes from it, right? And I think, again, is this kind of a lot of Bitcoiners, and especially people who work in the industry, are kind of weighing this kind of decision in their mind. They're like, well, this guy is buying burgers with Bitcoin, even if that's stupid. And he's like keynoting Bitcoin 2024. And he's saying that he's going to, help the industry. That seems better to me than the ones who have like tried to put bills to tax the shit out of Bitcoin miners. And also, the party of Elizabeth Warren that has like spread misinformation about Bitcoin being used to fund Hamas and has pushed for this like anti-crypto army or whatever. One last thing to note about this, if you go and watch the video again, I'm not trying to put him on blast because I love Drew Armstrong, but there's this moment there where they're trying to fulfill the lightning invoice and Drew's like, it went through. It's like there was like this moment of like, oh shit, is this not going to be as seamless as we hope? Are we going to end up having this kind of really embarrassing moment where the currency of the future doesn't actually fulfill its promises? And Will Cole, formerly of Unchained, went on Twitter saying there are a lot of glares and there was a lot of lighting and camera flashes. Maybe that was affecting the invoice, but I just thought that was kind of a funny moment where it's like, songs didn't work.
I think that's a great point to say that the user experience of Bitcoin still needs improving, right? To the degree that two people are out there assisting former President Trump in doing this transaction. But right. I do think the main takeaway to me of what you just said there is that, yeah, Bitcoin is like squarely within the Overton window now, I think. I mean, you talk to people, there is a general awareness across the board. Now, do people really understand it? No. There's still quite a bit of education to go, but there's definitely opinions formulating. And it is becoming like a closer and closer political topic, which is just very interesting. And like, is itself, I think, a mark of adoption to a degree that it has gotten this far.
I will 100% agree with that. I feel like you're getting to the point where the people saying this is all just a scam and vaporware, that contingent is shrinking. And you probably know this as someone who has worked in the industry for, I assume, like most of your, if not all of your professional career. I used to just like not talk about it. I used to be like, oh, yeah, I work in tech. Like when I was a journalist, I was like, I'm a tech journalist. And even like when I started at Luxor in 2021, I would just kind of say I work for a tech company. Now I'm less chagrined to tell people, oh yeah, I worked for a Bitcoin mining company. I cover the industry as a journalist, and the career risk is really kind of evaporated. People may not know what it is, people may not get it, but they're less likely to be like, that's all bullshit. I don't think people can hand wave it away anymore, which is a good place to be in.
No, the disapproving looks and the blank stares, that's what fuels me, Colin. That's what kept me going. Yeah, I was a proud talker of, yes, I'm a professional in this industry. And let me just feel your dismay. That keeps me going.
You have more gumption and pride than I do. Maybe that's good. Maybe I should be less. Be like, yeah, I work in Bitcoin. I boil the oceans. That's what I'm about. Speaking of boiling oceans and hating Bitcoin mining, which still does ignite a visceral hate from some people. I kind of understand the moment we're in. A lot of people think that the earth is dying. So anything that seems to be wasteful energy use, they don't like it. But this was an interesting story, and this kind of pairs well with, we got a lot of nice complementary stories in the lineup this week. And this really pairs nicely with RFK's Economist letter. And basically, this is a story out of the humble hamlet of, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this at all. What is it? It's called Stokmarknes. I don't know. Jaren Mellerud, if you're watching this or any Norwegian, I'm sorry, I just butchered your beautiful language. But anyway, this small town had a Bitcoin mine in it, and it was paying roughly paying roughly 20% of, or sorry, let me back up. The energy provider in the town, the utility, about 20% of their income came from this Bitcoin miner. The Bitcoin miner went bankrupt. Its name is Crypto Vault. They went bankrupt, and eventually that bill is going to be footed onto the other consumers in the town and the residents. I think the mayor or someone has estimated roughly 30% of, or roughly $300 per year will be passed on to the consumer now. As Jaren Mellerud points out, the CEO or one of the miners and researchers at Hash Labs Mining says that about 300% or $300 per year will be added to these Norwegian residents' power bill. So kind of just to recap, this miner paid about 20% of the area's grid fees, kind of subsidizing lower costs for everyone else. They go bankrupt, they leave. Now these Norwegian residents are going to expect about a $300 increase per year to their power bill. And there were some legitimate complaints and concerns, as Jaren points out here. It was an extremely noisy mine. It was right next to residential centers. Those are legitimate complaints, and I don't think that Bitcoin miners do themselves any favors when they talk about, we'll just get over it or whatever. There do need to be some, attempts to be made to sound dampen and things like that. But I just thought that this story was interesting. Apologies for tripping over my words, everyone. We're getting to the end of the stream and Colin's brain is breaking down. But it really does show that, contrary to a lot of the negative talking points, Bitcoin mining can actually lower energy costs for people, because it's basically soaking up the surplus from some of these companies and giving them revenue that they can then, pass on in a way to the residents of the town, right? So it's kind of it with that. I don't know if you have any second takes on this story.
It's an interesting example of how a seemingly small area of an economy can actually cascade and have a big impact on people's lives. That's like, in a nutshell, the story, in my opinion. And also, it gets at kind of a larger, more philosophical question and debate about central planning, which we will save for another podcast. But yeah, I hadn't heard of the story until you just told it. So a $300 increase must be just absolutely major on a relative basis, I have to imagine. But yeah, wow.
And to be clear, it's 300 over the course of the year, so it's not a crazy. If it was 300 per month, that would be wild. But even so, 300 per year, I mean, that's $300 that could go into savings. That's $300 that you could use to purchase a new appliance for your home. $300 that you would have to take a weekend trip somewhere, perhaps. It's not necessarily huge, but at the end of the day, I don't, if the utility said, hey, by the way, your bill is going to increase $300 per year, I'd be like, oh, well, that kind of sucks. I don't really want that, right? But I like that point about it's a good example of kind of the second order effects of some of these industries leaving some of these towns, right? And how energy is always at the center of this. I mean, the thing that comes to mind for me is how Germany's industrial base was absolutely shook by the increase to energy, the energy price increases that they've experienced during like the huge inflationary period in 2021 and 2022, right? They were not buying oil and gas from Russia anymore. They shut down some of their nuclear fleet, and then they had to pivot towards coal to keep the lights on. And Germany has a massive manufacturing base. And if your energy prices increase by too much, those jobs are going to go elsewhere. They're going to try to find other areas where they can have cheaper energy to run those industrial sites. So anyway, that's kind of a wrap for this week. Matt, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts, anything that you want to say about central planning and how much you love constitutional monarchies.
You were trying to put me in a bad place, Colin, and I am not going to respond to it. I'm going to say, everyone out there, I hope you enjoy your weekends, and that this was a fun one with you, Colin. So I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And apologies for my slander. He's not a monarchist, in case you couldn't tell, but I just have to bust his chops a little bit. But on that note, thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you all have a beautiful weekend. Get out, soak in some of that cool autumn air. Go pick some pumpkins. Don't put your Halloween decorations out yet, though, guys. It's not time. You have an entire month. So just I've already seen them cropping up in my neighborhood. It's like, just wait on that a little bit, please. But that's it. That's my last rant. Appreciate y'all tuning in, and we hope everyone has a beautiful weekend. See y'all next week.